Good morning to you. Thank you so much for still being with us here at Morning at NTV. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga. Now, we do have 5 minutes to the top of the hour, 8 a.m., but we do continue the conversations that are affecting the citizen of this country, Uganda. Among them is, of course, the commodity prices and the rising prices of things that fall in the commodity basket. As we did look at it yesterday, we continue to have that conversation today. In our Kickstarter, among the other conversations we're going to be looking at is, of course, the security situation between Uganda, DRC Congo, and the partnership with Rwanda. We're going to also be looking at the Omoro seat that is still empty, waiting by elections by the Electoral Commission, and how different parties are actually gearing up for that participation. Here to have these conversations with me is Mr. David Louis Rubongoya, Secretary General, NUP. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
How are you?
Good morning to the viewers.
Which party did you attend over the weekend? We had so many parties over the weekend.
For us, we were with the Muslims, and we had an iftar dinner hosted by President, the Honorable Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu, and so that's what we did on the weekend.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Over the weekend, we had Mr. Muhoozi having his birthday party, 48th birthday party. A lot of dignitaries came into the country. Of course, currently we're having bilateral conversations that are happening between the President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and our President Museveni. They're trying to reboot the frozen relations within the country. And as a party, what is your stance on how these, challenges came through, the border-to-border challenges came through, how we have managed to survive through them, and what are the possibilities of having a thriving border-to-border relationship with Rwanda?
Yeah, first of all, I prefer really not to discuss the birthday party because it's a very, very big shame. You're talking about the rising fuel prices, you're talking about the commodity prices. Ugandans are suffering, and our rulers are busy having birthday parties, lavish parties, and that kind of thing. I mean, we see this with Mobutu, we see this with all despots that have come before General Museveni, and we know how it normally ends with Gaddafi and others who were always throwing lavish parties as citizens cried and because of the economic condition. Regarding our relations with Rwanda, the Republic of Rwanda, we've made it clear that as long as relations between countries are based on interests, but most importantly based on states, they should be interstate relations, not about individuals. And the problem with Uganda is that foreign relations are treated as a General Museveni and affair with other leaders. And so that's what we are opposed to. You saw the last time when we were saying, why is it that it is not the Minister for Foreign Affairs going to Rwanda to mend fences with the President there and that kind of thing? So as long as it's just looked at as General Museveni and another President affair, it is bound to have all these issues because tomorrow you'll have issues with another person, ego issues and so many other issues. And who ends up suffering? The common Ugandans, because you can imagine for all these years with a closed border and all that, it is the people of Uganda who have been suffering and the people of Rwanda indeed who have suffered from the frozen relations. So our approach would be that let this be institutionalized so that Uganda's cooperation with other countries is based not just on individuals but on countries and institutions.
Okay, all right. And through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in this case, what are the issues that you would like to be addressed in this reopening of this relationship?
It's what I've said. We have we talk about security, the economic situation, and many other issues. So for me, if I was, unfortunately, the people who rule over us cannot see things in that perspective. But first of all, there must be respect. I think one of the challenges that has always happened, and indeed the President of Rwanda has talked about it a number of times, the idea that sometimes they don't feel respected. And so there must be mutual respect. A sovereign country must be respected by another sovereign country, and they should be treated as such. So if we were in power, which the people of Uganda actually entrusted us with in 2021, what we would be focusing on are those mutual interests between the people of Uganda and the people of Rwanda. And those mutual interests are trade, security, geopolitics, etc., etc.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We also have the security situation in DR Congo, where we've had, of course, the UPDF going in there to help fight the M23. And we've had the president saying many countries in Africa have got security problems because of the structure of their armies. And so we have a structure here with the UPDF, and it's doing regional security keeping. But within the country, we seem to be grappling with security issues.
Yeah, but of course that's the challenge you have, and that's why I talked about personalization of institutions. You've seen General Museveni and now his son calling it my army. That is extremely wrong. And every Ugandan must be angry with this.
No, there's the UPDF army, then there's the Mhozi army. Two different armies.
No. I mean, so the law does not recognize that other army that you're talking about. The law, if you look at Article 208 of the Constitution, 209 and others, they talk about the Uganda People's Defense Forces. They talk about an army which should belong to the people of Uganda. And that army is or should be accountable to the Parliament of Uganda. That is why there are laws in place to say that before you deploy troops abroad, you must come to Parliament, seek parliamentary approval. Once you seek parliamentary approval, because the money you're going to spend on this military has to be approved by Parliament. The challenge we have is that we have a personalized army, all personalized institutions, and indeed, you know, the way Parliament is being treated also as if it's a personal institution. So that's a challenge. So the UPDF is in the DRC. The people of Uganda are asking, how long is it supposed to be there? What are the objectives? What is the ultimate end of this mission that you're going for? The people of Uganda, through their representatives, must be able to account if a Ugandan soldier dies in the DRC. That is the reason why you must seek approval of the Parliament to be able to send troops abroad, because first of all, it touches the lives of the people, these troops you're sending out there. It touches their welfare, it touches the budget of the country, and such other things. And of course, I must add, you remember what the ICJ did recently. It condemned Uganda to trillions of shillings because we went into the DRC in the 90s and caused havoc there. Already there have been very many serious human rights violations in the DRC. I don't know if you saw a video where some troops were posing with dead bodies and that kind of thing. It's really disheartening to see that. So the reason why Parliament must be informed before these the troops go abroad is because there must be accountability mechanisms about human rights issues and all the others. Okay,
all right. Still regarding Parliament, there's an empty seat in Parliament, the Omoro District Representative seat. And as NUP, you have 8 candidates that you have to vet through to get that one flag bearer. How is that process going for you? What are you looking at to change in Omoro District should you get that seat?
Of course, I know that if we had free and fair elections, there's no place in this country where we would not win. The challenge has always been that we go into elections. You saw what happened in Kayunga, where up to now we are stuck with our DRR forms because we have the DRR forms which give us a 15,000 vote lead against the NRM candidate in Kayunga. But Mr. Yabakama and his electoral commission announced whatever they wanted. So even as we go into Omoro, we know the challenges that await us, and for us, our role, like we've already said, is to go in there and mobilize the people. Tell them that actually the power belongs to them. That's why we say people power, our power. Yes, we have our candidates who express interest. Unfortunately, the regime
Looking at the candidates that have so far expressed interest, you have Charles Ochara, who's a businessman. You do have Simon Tolit, who's a businessman and a former MP of Omoro. You also do have Mr. Okoth Obok Secondo, and others include Brian Oduor, an educationist. You do have Flavia, a lady, a PO in there who's a lawyer, Oscar Kiza, who's a lawyer, Dennis Oluba, and also Isaac Ojok. Those are the 8 members that are interested in the seat for Omoro County as NUP flag bearers.
Yeah, as I speak now, from here I'll be going for the executive board meeting of the party, and we should be able to have a decision about our candidate today.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So away from that, of course, you do have other parties that are interested in this by-election. You do have Forum for Democratic Change that has also zeroed down to Dennis Dick Owani, an accountant, and also going to be the flag bearer in that perspective. Now, you also bring about Parliament, and there's different contexts contentious issues on the parliamentary floor right now. One of them is the coffee deal with Miss Penny, the lady that we're talking about here, who owns the Uganda Vinci Coffee Company, and how we entered into a deal with her as government in the absence of the Ministry of Agriculture being represented in that dialogue. And she was given quite a number of incentives over a long period of time, which are going to be affecting coffee farmers expectedly. So many opinion leaders have called it a bad deal that should be teared down. What is your opinion on this deal?
You know, as long as you have a personalized country, a country which is under capture, you expect all these things. So that's why every time I come on the show, for me, my message to the people of Uganda is that as long as, so you see, we're talking about Loboa, we're talking about the coffee thing, we're talking about rigged elections. From the time we've talked about Rwanda-Uganda relations. So everything that you talk about is a result of bad governance. Now you can imagine you're in a country where the Ministry of Finance enters into an agreement not touching a sector, coffee, which is the second highest, foreign exchange earner for the country, without involving the Ministry of Agriculture, but most importantly, without involving the farmers, without involving the coffee farmers, because they are the ones who own the coffee. Government does not own any coffee, but somehow, because of the arrogance, because they feel they can do anything, they sit down somewhere, come up and do an agreement which binds even the common person down there in the village. So that's what we're talking about. We have been for a very long time as NUP and indeed other parties saying let these incentives be extended to Ugandans. You know, you look at that agreement and you see the lack of shame. You give this person incentives up to 10 years, you even tell them that you exempt them from NSSF for their workers.
Certain taxations.
Taxation, yes. etc. And you can imagine, these are incentives which Ugandans are always asking for. When you talk, the reason why I pointed out NSSF is because if the Ugandans are lucky to be employed by that organization, it means that even them, they are not going to be able to earn the social security benefits,
fund, yes.
The social security benefit that NSSF should be providing for them. So you can imagine the entire agreement is routed in illegality and immorality.
Okay, and as NUP, how would you rearrange this agreement to actually favor and enhance the boosting of this cash crop in conversation?
We wouldn't enter such an agreement first and foremost because it is wrong. You know, why don't you first of all, there was a coffee marketing board here.
In the sense that there's an investor who has come and they want to invest heavily in coffee in Uganda, how would you actually treat them in favor of Ugandans more?
But we believe that Uganda should have the ability to process its own coffee and be able to export it as a finished product, because that's what the government is trying to say, that is the reason why this deal was important. And we're saying that you do not need to give this. I mean, like I said, there was a coffee marketing board here, which was, if it had been empowered, it would be doing this. But you destroy that, you destroy cooperatives, and then you say, let's bring in foreign investors to do this. But what we've seen over the years, although this Italian investor is fronted, most of the times, if you lift the veil, as the lawyers say, you will see some bigwigs or some, state cronies behind, in there. So they have taken over the land, they have taken over so many things. You know what has been happening on the lake, and now they come for coffee, which is what was basically left for these poor people to be investing in. So we wouldn't enter into an immoral agreement of that nature, but most importantly, we would consult the people. The reason why we're people power is because we believe in the power of people, and we want the people of Uganda to have a voice.
And have you made consultations to the people regarding how they feel about this coffee deal, especially the coffee dealers, as far as distribution, farming, and the whole chain of commerce is concerned in coffee?
We have. If you look at our manifesto,
and what's their say?
That's what I'm talking about. First of all, in our manifesto, we even say that we should revamp cooperatives for value addition, to be able to empower these farmers, make sure that, for example, a cash crop like coffee should be processed in Uganda, because we have the ability to do that. We have the money. This money which we're talking about, which is being spent on these military expeditions, birthday parties and all that, can actually go into all these. We can invest in these kinds of things. Yes, the objective is there, but isn't it also a shame that 36 years later, we are dealing with something as simple as processing coffee and making sure that we export it as a finished product. Isn't it concerning for the people out there?
So again, back to the question, from the consultations that you have made with the people on your side, what is their stance on this conversation?
That's what they are saying. The people say, let us, it is us who own the coffee. Let us be allowed to organize and process our coffee and make sure that we're able to set the prices. Because my warning is, and the warning is that this kind of agreement which gives a monopoly to an Italian investor, before long they are going to set the price to whatever they want. And this is not the first time. It has happened a number of times.
They set the price to what they want, and they pick the premium, and then you stay with substandard product. And that's
what I'm saying. So eventually, the common person out there who is invested right now in coffee will have to abandon it ultimately. And then before you know it, they will even have monopoly over the coffee growing, etc., etc. I mean, like I'm saying, this is what has been happening over time.
So as the National Unity Platform, you have the power, and as you say, of the people. And in this particular conversation, boosting the economy, you don't need to be the president, you don't need to be the majority in parliament right now. You do have a platform to actually influence and also invest in this particular conversation, such as coffee. How are you planning to influence, to lead, and to change the stance of coffee from where you are right now without necessarily entering into government?
No, what you need to understand is that if you do not have political power in the country, the people of Uganda voted for us, that's for a fact, and we've not yet taken power, and that's our constant struggle. Without that, you can only talk about alternatives, which is what I'm doing now.
You have allies that have come on board with you on different other projects. They have supported you through the 2021 elections. So why not use those allies to now make substantial, evidential things that then in the next election people can look at and say, yeah, Noop influenced this on this ground, on this level, maybe on a higher level we can still trust them.
But that's what we're doing, where our parliamentary front is there trying to influence. You see, the reason why there's a parliament, one of the core functions of that parliament is legislation. And all we can do is, for example, this law, this particular agreement, as terrible as it is, will end up affecting everybody, because the laws, however illegal, are the ones being implemented. And I want to appreciate the lawyers who went to court about this coffee thing, and they're challenging it. But as long as this agreement still stands, and regime officials are acting with this kind of arrogance, it means that it is what is going to be implemented in the country. Without political power, it is difficult to implement most of these things, because you've seen, if we cannot even be allowed to mobilize, to go out there to do a radio program, how shall we go and, for example, when you talk about investing in coffee and that kind of thing, if businesses of known associates of NUP are closed down in different parts of the country, how are we expected then to go and somehow invest in coffee? I don't seem to understand the question. But the point I'm making is that for us, our struggle right now is to be able to recapture this power, take out this power which was captured from the people of Uganda, return it to the people, so that the people of Uganda can then determine their own destiny, including things like agriculture, healthcare, education, etc., etc.
Okay, you've spoken about Parliament and the voice and representation that you have right now. However, limitations are that most recently there was a conversation on the parliamentary floor. The numbers are too many, over 529 members of Parliament. Each one of them cannot be heard or even given a say in the parliamentary sittings that they have regularly. That means that very few members of Parliament are always constantly going to be speaking about the issues that concern the wananchi, and that means that obviously because of the majority and the minority, that is also going to affect who gets to actually voice their opinions about the issues concerning the citizens of this country. What would be your advice in regards to ensuring that there is a whole round table of conversation, a hearing of every member of Parliament, at least a certain percentage of 80%, for them to actually come to agreement in the things that they deliberate about on a daily?
Yeah, first of all, you need to understand why the Parliament is...
should they reduce the numbers of representation in the near future?
That's what we suggested in our manifesto. We suggested in our manifesto that the government should be small. We believe in a government that is small but efficient. Because as we've seen, it's just not about the numbers. But you need to understand why General Museveni keeps creating these constituencies and giving them out as he wishes, as he pleases. It is simply because of something called gerrymandering. You know, he wakes up and then if he realizes that power is shifting, he just gets a district, divides it into 4, gets a constituency, divides it into 3, and that kind of thing, to be able to get the numbers in parliament and that kind of thing. Because he knows that in those rural areas, he can rig elections unabated and that kind of thing. And that's why you even heard about this immoral talk of choosing a president through parliament. This is what we're talking about. And like I said, as long as we still have a regime that believes and thinks that way,
okay,
you cannot. So our view as NUP is that parliament should be reduced. And that should apply to all other entities.
What would be the criteria of reduction in your opinion?
For example, right now we have 146 districts. Too many in my view. Too many. But what if you have one male representing this district and one woman? Wouldn't you reduce the numbers of MPs substantially? But then you have UPDF in parliament. For what? You keep asking yourself all these questions, and of course they cannot make sense. It's just a system of patronage that General Museveni has tried to implement in this country. Yeah. Okay.
All right. We also have the conversation of the Lubowa Hospital, specialized hospital, that is not yet completed. Roughly, we did have members of parliament paying a visit recently, and what they saw is not what they expected. That yet they had signed off a release of 1.3 trillion shillings in regards to this project. We do have the Ministry of Finance having tabled a request supplementary of 300 billion shillings to be able to continue with those works for the specialized hospital. Let's talk about, first of all, why did we have to get a specialized hospital done by an outsider when we can have the capacity to do the specialized hospital, even if in phases, right here within Uganda, by Uganda, build Uganda?
But, you know, again, I don't see any difference between this conversation of Lubowa, the coffee thing, the E.DRC thing, the Rwanda. Everything is just a mess. You know, like I said, instead of having leaders, you have dealers. And they're always looking for any deal. You know, they're always, you know, once they deplete something, they say, now, what is the next deal? And they go for it. You heard how at some point they couldn't account for 240 billion shillings with regard to this Lubowa hospital project, the so-called specialized hospital project. Now, you're in a country where this hospital was, when it was being handed over to this investor, they said by June 2021, it should have been completed. And by that time, it was still at the foundation level. I heard them saying that, you know, it's COVID which affected us, and coming up with all sorts of excuses, ridiculous to say the least. When I saw the members of parliament asking them, can you account for the money that we gave you? What has that money done? You cannot say it. So it is the same thing, really. It is the same thing. That in this country, regardless of what comes up, it will always be riddled with corruption and frustrated in many ways. And I don't expect much from it, like I don't expect much from any other thing in this country, as long as General Museveni and his regime are still here. Okay,
all right. So we have seen cases of lobbying, as you are calling it, dealing, lobbyists who come in and actually entice the government to give the money to make investments in our own country. And yet, on the other hand, given the debt burden that we have because of borrowing for local infrastructure, best example is the Entebbe International Airport and our partnership with the Chinese government in regards to that. How would you streamline these kinds of deals to be able to have them in one way or another funded by Ugandans, or at least get into bed with partnerships with governments that will ensure everything that is being done is for the favor, or it's more for the person who's actually getting the funding, not the person who's giving out the fund? Because what happens is that the person who's giving you the money has the power. That's how any deal works. But in this sense, how would we revert it that the person who's receiving the money retains the power to actually also get exactly what is beneficial to them and adds value to them?
Yeah, but even before you talk about who gives the money, you've seen so many deals, just like the Rwanda issue, where government itself has to give money to an investor, give this investor land, give them tax incentives, and at the end of the day still call this person an investor. And you're like, are we crazy? You know, what is this person investing? What are they investing if they... But you've just talked about the CAA thing, the Civil Aviation Authority thing, and the findings of COSASE. It's the same thing for me. I think it's just that we have dealers. People are always looking at deals. And if NUP was in power, what we do is to streamline these things. To make sure that, first of all, before you enter into any agreement, there's proper consultation with the stakeholders, that you engage experts and allow them to do their work. You've seen that there's a lot of influence peddling. You're talking about lobbyists who are always involved in these things. Everything is politicized. So you need to remove politics from these issues, because at the end of the day, the other day we were talking about it, that if every child who's born in Uganda, you, myself, and everyone is indebted to a tune of 1.5 million Ugandan shillings. All of us, if we had to pay this, the national debt that is on our heads right now. So these deals that they are entering, they don't care what happens, because they know most likely they will be, they will no longer be here.
The generations to come.
Yeah, but your children, your grandchildren are going to be affected by these things which these people are signing. And of course for them, they are looking at securing their future, their individual future. Not looking at the country and what will happen to it.
Okay, speaking of securing the future, surely the country is grappling with the economy status right now. Fuel prices, diesel, you know, going ahead of petrol by a whole 130 shillings. That's absurd in our country right now. You do have commodities that are in households being expensive, and yet you're not seeing the relationship between what people are earning and what they're spending. How do we get to improve that situation right now?
Well, I don't think there is something I can tell the people of Uganda that, you know, this is how you can improve this. Again, like I said, as long as you have a government which seems not to be concerned. You've talked to the ministers, and they seem to say
strategic implementations you can advise.
And that's what I'm saying. What they've been saying is that we have to let the forces of demand and supply, the market economy, take lead. We cannot come in to intervene and that kind of thing. But there's something we call consumer protection. But even beyond that, you have all these taxes on these commodities, and we've been saying, okay, we know that globally there are issues now with fuel prices, etc., etc. We've said at least let the people of Uganda feel that the government cares by removing some of these taxes that you put. We were being told the other day that at the border, the fuel that comes into this country, people have to pay taxes, but also have to pay for sealing or marking of this fuel, etc., etc. Remove all these, you know, expenses, which at the end of the day, the person who goes to the pump should be able to afford this fuel. Now we're talking about diesel prices, etc., etc. But again, if you have a government which is not concerned, which is just concerned about how it stays in power, and that's why I want you to juxtapose what people are going through out there and what was happening on the weekend. This morning as I was coming here, the roads, most of the roads are blocked. You know, on Saturday and Sunday, some of the roads are blocked. That affects the economy. It affects, you know, someone who was supposed to use 2 hours to reach somewhere is going to use 4 or 5 hours. You know, all that has a spiral effect on the economy of the country. But the people of Uganda are grappling with high commodity prices, etc., etc. And what is the dictatorship and its cohorts doing? Having parties.
Well, they're having parties. But you've also mentioned taxation, maybe reduction of taxes on some of these commodities. However, according to the IMF, they recommend that increase in taxes at such a time as this is recommendable for the government to be able to take care of its debt burden and its economy. You
know, but first of all, what you need to ask yourself, the debt burden, for example, what is this debt doing? You see, it wouldn't be because every country in the world is indebted. Most of the countries have huge debts on their necks. But the key question should be, when they are borrowing this money, what is it doing? If the money that we are borrowing is being spent on bogus things like the Lubowa issue that has eventually, you know, been stuck for all these years now, then what are you talking about? How do you say you're going to increase taxes in order to pay debts, which debts are actually not helping the common people of Uganda? So that's why we are in a circus, so to say, that you borrow money, it is stolen, lost through corruption, and then immediately after that, you say that you need to either borrow to pay back more debts, or that you have to overtax the common person to pay those debts, which are actually not helping the common person.
Okay. You speak of corruption. It continues to be a conversation, especially as far as government entities are concerned. How would you recommend corruption be fought?
Corruption is simply fought through political will. There must be will to fight corruption. Simple. But if you have General Museveni come up to tell the IGG to go slow on a lifestyle audit, where you have you know, the president of the country saying, the leader of the country saying that, you know, these people can steal as long as they invest the money here. So how do you expect to fight corruption? By that declaration itself, you are simply encouraging people to be corrupt as long as they are going to set up hotels, etc. in the country, so to say. So there must be political will. You remember the former IGG saying that, you know, the problem with fighting corruption, because they're asking, why do you always go for the small fish and not for the big fish? And this lady said, you know what, the problem is, when I want to go for the big fish, I find them hiding behind the back of the president. So how can you fight corruption? You know, corruption is seen through voter bribery. It is seen through these kinds of lavish expenditure, patronage. You know, NUP people who are every day approached and told that if you cross from following Honorable Chagulanyi to this side, we can give you 500 million shillings. That's corruption. But it begins from State House and goes up to the lowest level. So before you talk about the corruption at the district, before you talk about the corruption at the sub-county, talk about corruption in the high places. If you deal with corruption in the high places, you will deal with corruption at the lowest levels. Okay, all right. Back to National Unity Platform. Of course, you've been advocating for prisoners right from the elections of 2021. And how far in that direction of having some of these inmates brought to justice and cases released? As I speak today, 36 of these are people who have been in prison, you know, since the election, are going to be brought to the court-martial for another time when they are applying for bail. But you can imagine, these are young people whose simple crime is supporting NUP. And they've been in prisons for all this time. No justice. Some of our people who are in prisons have not even accessed a single court. You know, Honorable Alan Sewanya and Honorable Segirinya and what they've been going through, you know, they are released by a court, they are immediately arrested. So you can imagine that's the kind of country we are in. And for us, what we are doing is to continue pursuing justice through all means possible. We've gone to the Constitutional Court, we've gone to the High Court, we have protested. So we've done what we can do in the circumstances, and we continue to do it, and to encourage our people to continue demanding for the freedom of political prisoners. In this country, we have over 100 people who are still stuck in prisons. Right now we have 15 people whose whereabouts are not known. Damlila John was aged 50. He was picked up from Chiseka Market in the full view of everybody. Up to now, he's nowhere to be seen. Yesterday, a lady called me whose son was abducted. The man is called Moses Kawenja. Up to now, no one knows where he is. And many others who are still missing. And in other countries, this would be a very, very big scandal, that a Ugandan can go missing. You have a constitution which says that when someone is arrested, they must be produced before court within 48 hours. Someone is taken and disappears for over a year. You saw last week the case of Marinos, Alexandria, a lady who was abducted, tortured, raped, and subjected to all manner of horrendous treatment by the military. Now, when she went there, she told us she found so many people. You remember the case of Masereka, our coordinator, Kakwenza and others. Each of these individuals who has been taken to those torture chambers comes up saying that there are so many people who are there,
okay,
whose whereabouts their relatives do not even know.
All right, torture falls under human rights, and we get to see the principal for NUP most recently attending a lot of human rights conferences internationally, being given a voice to talk about these conversations. What's the purpose and the intention of all these, appearances? Yeah,
we know that Uganda, you've been talking about aid, we've been talking about debts, etc., etc. We know that Uganda largely survives on foreign aid, but also we want the international community and the world to know what is happening in Uganda. Mind you, it is not us who have started this. I remember, if you look at a book called Mission to Freedom and many others, even sowing the mustard seed, General Museveni and his people used to move around the world, speaking at conferences, castigating Obote and Amin for human rights violations. We are saying that the person who you brought here and called him a beacon for democracy, etc., etc., is no longer that. He's a shell of his former self, and therefore you do not have to continue supporting such a regime. And we are sending a clear message to them that by continuing to support such a regime, you are actually partners in what goes on in Uganda. If someone is arrested, abducted, tortured, you saw what Kakwenza's back looks like. Every leader in the world should be ashamed to deal with such a regime which commits such atrocities on the people of Uganda. So that's why we continue, because we know that Uganda is part of the global economy, the global community, and so it's upon us to shine on what is going on in Uganda. Okay, all right. Well, those are the conversations that are stemming up and are affecting you and I, and that's the opinion of National Unity Platform, greatly represented by the Secretary General.